One quiet night in the Persian Gulf, one of the most important shipping routes on the planet, suddenly turned into a scene of chaos. A massive explosion tore through the calm waters as flames shot into the sky from a high-value American oil tanker carrying millions of dollars worth of crude oil to global markets. Within seconds, emergency signals flooded maritime radio channels, nearby ships changed course, and military forces across the region scrambled to respond. Early reports suggested something even more alarming. The tanker may have been hit by a missile, and according to initial intelligence, the attack may have come from Iran. If confirmed, this wouldn't just be another maritime incident. It could represent a dangerous escalation between two longtime rivals, the United States and Iran, in one of the most strategically sensitive waterways in the world. Before we dive deeper into what could happen next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our latest updates on global conflicts, geopolitics, and breaking world events. And I'd also love to hear your thoughts. Do you think this attack could escalate into a larger conflict, or will tensions cool down in the coming days? Drop your opinion in the comments below, because your perspective helps shape the conversation here on the channel. The Persian Gulf handles a huge portion of the world's oil supply, meaning even a single attack can ripple through global energy markets, international shipping routes, and geopolitical stability. Eyewitnesses described a giant fireball rising from the middle of the sea. Sailors on nearby vessels reported shockwaves rolling across the water as alarms echoed across communication systems. Within minutes, international shipping companies issued alerts and vessels began rerouting to avoid potential danger zones. The U.S. Navy quickly deployed surveillance aircraft and warships into the area. Meanwhile, analysts around the world began asking the same question. Was this an isolated strike or the beginning of something much bigger? Because in the Persian Gulf, a single missile doesn't just threaten one ship. It can shake the entire global economy. The Persian Gulf is one of the most heavily monitored and strategically important waterways in the world. Every day, massive oil tankers move through its narrow shipping lanes, transporting millions of barrels of crude oil from the Middle East to markets in Asia, Europe, and North America. Because of its importance to the global energy supply, the region has long been a hotspot for military patrols, geopolitical tensions, and high-stakes maritime operations. But on this particular day, what began as a routine transit quickly turned into a crisis. According to early reports from maritime monitoring agencies, a high-value American oil tanker was moving through the Gulf on a scheduled route when a powerful explosion suddenly erupted near the vessel. The blast was so intense that it could be seen from ships miles away. Witnesses described a bright fireball rising above the water as thick smoke spread across the horizon. Sailors aboard nearby cargo ships immediately began transmitting emergency alerts through maritime radio channels. Several crews reported feeling shockwaves ripple through the water as alarms sounded across their vessels. Within minutes, distress signals began circulating across international shipping networks, warning other ships in the area to stay clear. The targeted tanker was reportedly carrying a large cargo of crude oil destined for international markets. Because of the massive value of both the ship and its cargo, the vessel was considered a high-priority asset within global shipping operations. Any attack on such a ship immediately raises concerns not only about maritime safety, but also about energy security. Initial assessments suggested that the explosion may have been caused by a missile strike. According to defense analysts reviewing satellite data and radar patterns, the projectile appeared to have been launched with remarkable precision. This detail immediately raised suspicions that the attack may have been planned well in advance rather than being a random or accidental incident. Crew members aboard the tanker acted quickly after the blast. Reports indicate that part of the ship caught fire, forcing sailors to initiate emergency containment procedures. Fire suppression systems were activated while the crew attempted to isolate the damaged sections of the vessel to prevent the flames from spreading further. Although full casualty details have not yet been confirmed, early reports suggested that several crew members may have been injured and began evacuation support in case the situation worsened. The United States Navy responded rapidly to the unfolding incident. Warships already stationed in the Gulf were redirected toward the area, while surveillance aircraft were launched to monitor the surrounding waters. Military officials also began tracking radar data to determine the possible origin of the missile. The Persian Gulf has long been an area where military forces from multiple countries maintain a presence. American and allied naval units routinely patrol the region to protect shipping lanes and ensure safe passage for commercial vessels. Following the explosion, those forces were immediately placed on heightened alert. Meanwhile, shipping companies around the world began issuing advisories to their fleets. Several vessels in nearby shipping lanes altered their routes to create distance from the potential danger zone. Some companies even began considering temporary route adjustments until the security situation became clearer. While the investigation into the attack had only just begun, one fact was already undeniable. A single explosion in the Persian Gulf had just triggered a wave of concern across the global shipping industry, and the world was watching closely to see what would happen next. News of the attack spread across the world within hours, quickly dominating international headlines. Governments, defense agencies, and global markets all reacted to the possibility that a major escalation might be unfolding in one of the most sensitive regions on Earth. The United States government was among the first to respond publicly. Officials from the U.S. Department of Defense described the incident as extremely serious and confirmed that an immediate investigation had been launched. Military analysts began reviewing radar data, satellite imagery, and maritime surveillance footage to determine exactly where the missile had originated and who might have been responsible. Although no official conclusion had been announced in the early stages, many experts pointed toward the ongoing tensions between the United States and Iran as a potential factor. Relations between the two countries have been strained for years. Disputes over nuclear programs, economic sanctions, regional influence, and military presence in the Middle East have repeatedly brought the two nations to the brink of confrontation. Because of that history, any military-style incident in the Persian Gulf immediately raises concerns about possible escalation. Meanwhile, American naval forces increased their activity across the region. Surveillance aircraft conducted additional patrols while warships monitored nearby waters for any unusual movements. Military officials made it clear that protecting international shipping lanes remained a top priority. But the reaction was not limited to Washington. Across Europe, leaders expressed deep concern over the situation. Governments in the United Kingdom, France, and Germany issued statements urging restraint and calling for a thorough investigation. In a joint message, European officials emphasized that freedom of navigation and the safety of global trade routes must be protected at all costs. The Persian Gulf serves as a vital artery for global commerce. A significant portion of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow entrance to the Gulf. Any disruption in that corridor can have immediate consequences for the international economy, and the markets reacted quickly. Within hours of the reports, oil prices began to rise as traders assessed the risk of supply disruptions. Energy analysts warned that even the perception of instability in the region can cause major volatility in global markets. Insurance companies that specialize in maritime shipping also began re-evaluating risk levels for vessels operating in the Gulf. Higher risk ratings could potentially lead to increased shipping costs, which would ultimately affect global supply chains. Shipping companies themselves began taking precautionary measures. Some vessels slowed their movements through the region, while others explored alternative routes that would allow them to avoid areas considered high risk. At the same time, analysts on television networks and global news platforms began debating the broader implications of the incident. Was the attack intended as a warning? Was it an isolated act carried out by a regional proxy group, or was it the opening move in a larger geopolitical confrontation? For the moment, those questions remained unanswered. What was clear, however, was that tensions in the Persian Gulf had suddenly increased. And when tensions rise in a region responsible for such a large share of the world's energy supply, the consequences rarely stay local. As investigations into the attack continued, policymakers and security experts around the world began evaluating the possible outcomes of the incident. The stakes were high not only for the countries directly involved, but also for the broader global economy. The Persian Gulf is more than just a regional waterway. It functions as one of the most critical energy corridors on the planet. Every day, vast quantities of oil pass through its shipping lanes, supplying industries, transportation networks, and economies across multiple continents. Because of that, any disruption to traffic in the Gulf can create ripple effects far beyond the Middle East. Energy analysts quickly pointed out that a prolonged security crisis in the region could threaten global oil supplies. If tanker traffic were forced to slow down or reroute, it could lead to shortages in certain markets and drive prices significantly higher. Even the possibility of such disruptions can influence global energy markets. Countries that rely heavily on imported oil would be particularly vulnerable to sudden price spikes. For many developing economies, rising energy costs can affect everything from transportation to electricity production. That is why international powers often move quickly to contain tensions in the Persian Gulf. Diplomatic channels were reportedly activated soon after news of the attack broke. Governments began communicating with one another in an effort to prevent the situation from spiraling into a larger military confrontation. History has shown that the Persian Gulf can become a flashpoint for broader geopolitical conflicts. Over the decades, various incidents involving oil tankers, naval patrols, and military operations have periodically brought rival powers into dangerous proximity. Yet despite these risks, global leaders generally understand the importance of keeping the region stable. Military escalation in such a vital economic corridor could have consequences far beyond the battlefield. Shipping companies, energy corporations, and financial institutions were all closely monitoring the investigation. Their decisions about future operations in the region would depend heavily on whether the attack was determined to be an isolated incident or part of a broader campaign. Meanwhile, naval patrols continued across the Gulf as security forces attempted to reassure commercial vessels that the shipping lanes remained open and protected. For the crews aboard those ships, however, the sense of uncertainty remained very real. Sailing through the Persian Gulf has always required caution, but after the recent explosion, the risks felt closer than ever. At the center of the unfolding situation was one crucial question. Was the attack on the oil tanker simply a warning shot meant to send a political message? Or was it the first signal of a much larger confrontation waiting to unfold? The answer could determine not only the future of security in the Persian Gulf, but also the stability of global energy markets and international trade. For now, the world continues to watch the region carefully, because when tensions rise in one of the world's most important shipping corridors, the consequences can reach every corner of the planet.